If you want to be a better coach, stop giving advice and start asking better questions. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly how to coach by using questions so your team thinks clearer, takes ownership, and actually improves. Hi, I'm Jen. I have 20 years experience helping leaders and individual contributors to develop themselves and grow the skills they need for their careers. If this is the type of advice you're looking for, click on the like button to let me know. So let me ask you something right away. What if the best way to coach is to stop giving answers? It sounds counterintuitive, right? Because most people think coaching means teaching, correcting, or guiding with advice. But here's the truth. Great coaching is not about telling people what to do. It's about asking them what to do. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to coach individuals and leaders by using powerful questions in a way that feels natural, conversational, and actually gets results. So let's talk about why questions actually beat giving advice. Here's the problem with advice. When you give someone an answer, you might solve their problem temporarily, but you don't grow their thinking. Also, they don't take accountability for the results. Even if it turns out well, they look at it as something that you did, not something they accomplished. So it's much better for them to come up with their own solutions because it does help to grow their thinking as well as gives them the confidence that they implemented something they had created. So when you ask a question, you're forcing them to think, to reflect, and to take ownership. And that's where real leadership development happens. Because strong leaders don't need someone to fix things for them, they need someone who will help them to think differently, maybe even more effectively. So instead of becoming the answer person, you're actually the thinking partner. All right, so let's talk about coaching versus managing. And let's clear something up. Managing someone can sound like, here's what you should do. Coaching sounds more like, what do you think you should do? Managing creates dependency. Coaching builds independence. And if you're working with leaders, people who are already responsible for others, the last thing you want is to make them rely on you for every decision. So your role, regardless of the person that you are coaching, should be that you're the guide, not the hero. You're not the expert with all the answers, but the person who asks questions that unlocks clarity and helps them to figure out the answers. Something else that you need to keep in mind is the power of curiosity. At the heart of great coaching is one thing: curiosity. Not fake curiosity, not scripted questions, but genuinely being curious. You're not trying to lead them somewhere. You're trying to understand where they are and how they're thinking about the situation. Because once you understand their thinking, you can help them to improve it. So instead of considering what should I tell them, you should be asking yourself, what am I curious about right now? And that one shift can change the entire conversation. So let's go into 5 core coaching questions and make this very practical for you. Now, I know I have told you that this does not need to be scripted conversation, and that's not the purpose of giving you these questions. These questions are things that you can keep in mind because they're common universal questions that can help you to lead a conversation. Don't just memorize these questions as part of a script. Understand the purpose behind them and when you would use them. The first question is, what is really going on here? Now, this is not a question you are going to ask them specifically, but this is a question that you should be asking yourself. This question helps you to move past the surface level, because a lot of times the root cause of what is going on is not necessarily what they're saying in the beginning. And so asking yourself this question and then asking questions that will help them to uncover the actual root cause is what's going to give you the full story and help you to solve for the right problems. A question you will ask them is, what have you already tried? This avoids repeating you giving advice on things that they've already done, and it also shows respect for the effort that they've already put in to solve the problem themselves. Another thing that this does is it sets the expectation. If they've come to you before with coaching and you've asked this question, then they know that you're going to want to know the attempts that they've already made, which sets the expectation they should have already made some attempts instead of just coming to you for the answer. Now, question number 3 is, what options do you see? Another question that you would ask them directly. And this is where the ownership starts to build. You're asking them to think of other solutions. Even if they say, I don't know, stay with it. And sometimes they may need a second or two to think. If they can't answer it immediately, it is okay to be quiet for a few seconds to give them a chance to think through it. Question number 4 is, what feels like the best next step? Notice that it isn't what should you do. Asking should makes it imply that there's an absolute right and an absolute wrong answer, like it's a test or something. And that's not what this conversation should be about. This question is designed to help them process their thinking and to prioritize the steps that they would take next. Our last question is, what might get in the way? And this prepares them for reality, because sometimes plans don't go the way we expect them to. And it's not because they fail from a lack of ideas. It's because they may not be looking at the bigger picture or any downstream impacts that their actions may have. And this question can not only help them think through what a solution might be, but any contingencies that they may need to put in place for this to be successful. So now that we've gone over these questions that you can ask, let's talk about listening as a coach. And this is where most people mess up. They'll ask a question and then immediately jump in with advice. Or if the person doesn't respond immediately, they may ask another question or another question and overwhelm the person with too much talking. Give the other person a chance to think through the situation, to think through your question, and answer. If you're going to ask a question, you have to actually listen to them, and not just to respond, but to really understand what is going on. So let them think, let them pause, and let it be a little bit awkward if you're uncomfortable with silence. Because that silent space, that's where breakthroughs could happen. Okay, so let's walk through a coaching scenario. Imagine a leader says, my team isn't performing, and I feel like I have to do everything myself. As the coach, instead of telling this individual, well, you should delegate more, try asking, what's making it hard to delegate right now? They may answer, I don't trust the quality. And then you could respond with, what would you need to be true for you to trust them more? Now they're going to think. Now they're going to try to solve for the problem. Now it's their idea, their solution, and not yours. And that's the difference between advice and coaching. So let's quickly talk about some common mistakes to avoid. And these are a few traps that a lot of coaches fall into. So mistake number 1 is asking leading questions. Instead of those open-ended questions that invite conversation, they basically will give advice in the form of a question. And this could sound something like, so, don't you think that you should create a plan and communicate it? That's not coaching. That really is telling someone what to do in the form of a question. Another thing is asking too many questions. We've mentioned this earlier, but just a quick reminder. Asking too many questions feels like an interrogation or an interview or a test. So just slow down and think about going deeper into the conversation instead of going wider with the information. Mistake number 3 is not letting silence happen. A lot of us are uncomfortable with silence in a conversation, but if you rush to fill the gap, you interrupt their thinking process, especially if that person is very analytical. They may need more time than what you are used to for them to really analyze how to respond to your question. So, when you ask the question, let it breathe. Let that silence happen so they can think it through. I have one more tip for you, but before we get into it, if you're finding this information helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing the video with someone who could use these tips. Now, our final point. Build your coaching habit. This isn't something you master overnight, but here's a simple way to start. In your next conversation, ask one more question than you normally would and give one less piece of advice. And that's it. Just slowly work your way into it so that you're comfortable as you're growing your coaching skills. Do that consistently, and you'll start to notice something. People will come to their own conclusions faster. They'll take more ownership, and they will grow without you needing to push them. And that's real coaching. If you'd like additional resources as you continue to grow your coaching and leadership skills, check out the description and the pinned comment below. One final thought. You don't need better answers to become a great coach. You need better questions. So next time you're in a conversation, pause, get curious, and ask. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.